Okay, we are back with a new podcast. And as you know, we got to get it going with an anticipated rematch discussion as such.
Wow, coming in hot, my guy. Coming in like AM radio, baby.
What are you talking about?
A little
Yeah, you gotta, this is like, what do they do? The corny radio stations where they're like, it's the so-and-so, you got to get on with Jerry, and Jerry's going to get the comedian on and embarrass him.
Yeah. That's so what's it like to be a comic?
So what's it like being on the road? Are there girls that talk to you?
Yeah. Well, and also, guys, this is just what happens when you get the production meeting live on air.
Yeah, it's great. So, Oshaki Foster defeats Robson Conceicao. I'm probably saying Hobson's name all wrong.
No, I went back. All right. I think
I did all right. Yeah, I've got a lot of experience with this fight, and I want to start with like a hot take because I feel like the general what I've read is Shock won. People now are indifferent to both fighters. The enthusiasm around this fight was low because a lot of people felt like we did that Shock won the first fight. So those people were excited about the fight. When it turned out to be a very tactical fight, we heard words like boring, etc. I wanted to frame the discussion first in guys like Oshaki Foster and Robson Conceicao are guys that I really like that take real fights. And when you take tough fights, you're not always just going to be able to like dominate, and you're not going to get action-packed fights. So when I went back and watched this, yes, there were times where guys aren't punching, but I saw a lot of things that, for me at least, and maybe I'm super nerdy, I saw both guys at a very high level, intensely focused and worried about like pride. Pride was on the line. I think they both felt wronged. Shock felt like he had lost his belt unfairly. And I think Conceicao felt as though he didn't get credit for what he did in the first fight. And I think there was a unique tension to this fight that created that early part of the fight that people misconstrue, in my opinion, as boring. I think that was tension. You're muted.
There was definitely a lot of tension. There's no doubt about that. It's weird. I would not have classified this as a boring fight. I'm not saying it wasn't a Gotti award, but I felt like Shock was pressing the action for a lot of the fight, and it was making Conceicao work a little bit. And you had that kind of recurring dynamic where Shock is on the way in, and sometimes he gets all the way in and gets his shots off, and sometimes Conceicao is able to keep him at distance, but he's not necessarily landing cleanly. So it was it was very tactical, but there was a lot going on at the same time. I think the first reaction from me was feeling like maybe Shock had changed what he was doing a little more than he needed to. The first fight was so one-sided, and then the approach on this fight is pretty front foot, which on one hand is understandable, right? Because you didn't get the decision on the last one. You want to change your approach to some extent, but maybe not to that extent, because it felt like it kind of played into some of Conceição's strengths. And then on the flip side, it was like Conceicao was better in this one too. It felt like he went and did his homework a little bit and figured out the range where, maybe Shock is not as effective as he is. And, I thought it was a good fight, bro.
I think if you're a gym guy and you're a fan of really thinking through fights, you'd like this fight. I think a lot of times people are looking for action-packed fights with like a lot of punches being thrown. For what I saw in this fight was Conceicao and Foster came in with a lot of emotion, and I think it's hard to not come into a fight like this with emotion. And Conceicao came to kind of get his respect back from anyone that said he didn't deserve to win the fight. And Foster, I think, came in with the mentality of, I'm going to stop him. That's the mindset I looked at. Was he was putting a lot of pressure on him. He wasn't as much doing the quote unquote boxing thing. He was looking to put a lot of physical, but also mental pressure to make Conceicao have to move excessively and to force him to work all that time. And in that second half of the fight, and by the way, Bobby Benton, once again, coaches another great fight, completely different style than Regis Prograis. And once again, the fight might have been up on the line. And what does Bobby do? He tells him, you can't take your power. Go for it. Go for it. Tells him what he needed to hear when the fight could have very well been on the line. It was a split decision victory. Bobby Benton has a history of getting guys to win close fights when the outcome is up in the air. I think we need to also talk about how Bobby coached a fantastic fight that helped Shock kind of get through the finish line.
Yeah, totally. I felt like the poise in the corner was kind of what he needed. I know that in the way they were calling it was like Bradley wanted them to get a little bit more maybe emotional, but I don't know that that's what would have worked. And I also don't think that in that particular instance, it's like, I trust Shock as a fighter. So you'll at a certain point, you got to trust your fighter. You know what I'm saying? And it just felt like that's what he was doing. And it was beautiful to watch.
Well, and also like, I'm not sure this is factual, but this is my observation. As I keep saying, both guys felt as though they came into the fight with a lot of emotion. So I feel like a corner that's filled with emotion might not be the most helpful corner.
Right, when the fight is already inherently emotional, I don't need you adding to it.
Because I think that Foster, well, in our opinion, rightfully, but in his mind, feels as though this was an injustice. And if an injustice happens to you, I think it's hard to be rational, and it's hard to enter that without a feeling of coming into it with some emotion and wanting to do something. So I think the way Aaron Navarro and Bobby Benton were in that corner, if they ramped up the emotion, that fight could have gotten weird and out of control. I think that you have to know it's something Bobby once told me, you have to know the fighter. And I think that because he knows the fighter and because he was able to do that, people assume that's just what everyone would do. And I think he doesn't get the credit maybe other coaches would do, because I've seen him get on people's ass, basically.
And I think also part of that is going to inherently be because this one was closer. You know what I mean? Like, and we'll get into this part later, but the framing of the fight was that somehow the first fight was a close fight. It wasn't a close fight.
Let's get into that. The first fight was not a close fight. The first fight was such a one-sided fight. I started doing other things and spit my soda on my beautiful flat screen on TV because I couldn't believe that the outcome was. And the hardest thing about this is, and I want Dakota to do a J.R. Smith coming off the bench, Jamal Crawford going for 20 in a second. I want you to get your numbers. Just come in and do.
Do you know that that's my favorite basketball player?
Who, J.R. or Jamal Crawford?
Jamal Crawford.
Well, I mean, he's a lot of people. The king of the 4-point play.
Yeah, dude. I didn't know if you were doing that poll because you knew that was my favorite player.
That was just a spirit thing. My spirit knew.
My spirit reminds you, dude. That's a massive compliment.
Yeah,
and this is some real nerd shit, but that is a massive compliment. And the night that he dropped 52 points on the Heat, I was there, and I watched him hit 17 shots in a row, and it was fucking insane.
He's one of those guys, right, where he might not win you a championship, but you're going to love him being on your team, and it's almost better than winning a championship because he's going to give you a lot of really awesome memories.
Well, sweet. If I'm Jay Crawford, I'll take it, bro. Continue your point. I'm sorry.
I'm going to want you to come in, but so with that night, we kind of lost it on the show. We lost it because it was crap. You know, here's and what sucked about it is I'm a huge Robson Conceicao fan. I love that he takes all these tough fights. He's a real guy. I think his punches hit harder than people think they do because they're kind of slappy, but I think he has good snap on him in his weird way. And I love Foster rebuilding himself, facing all these adversities in his career, and continuously winning these big fights, continuously beating the system, right? So I'm a fan of both of these guys. And what frustrated me about this was it kind of stalled both guys' careers. It turned two likable fighters into two fighters the fans felt indifferent about. And if we're going to be honest, and we try to be honest on this show, the ESPN Plus telecast, which I enjoy, kind of felt like they didn't really have a story to tell beyond just whatever they were doing with Judges Cam. So I think there wasn't a story being told about these two compelling figures, it was more a story of indifference that I feel like has kind of plagued these two fighters' careers, that they're professionals, that they're not personalities, they're not character based, they're just fighters. And I guess I felt a little disappointed going into this fight that there was so much tension and we didn't really get to know more about these fighters and about their inner feelings going into this bout. Rather, it was about these cameras and that the first fight now is suddenly a close fight. And it just didn't feel like what I wanted from it, to be honest.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I got a little construction noise going on outside. So if it gets too bad, Lukie's going to let me know, or somebody's going to let me know in the comments. The biggest issue for me on this one was the way it was being framed as, well, not everybody's seeing the same fight, right? So look at these still cams where one's like behind the rope and one is behind this and one is in front of that. And I'm like, bro, are we saying you can't move your head? Like, are you putting a camera in the middle of these people's foreheads? Like, what is the thought process behind showing that? And also, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that because there's different angles to the ring that there isn't any type of consensus that can be made about a fight if you know what you're watching? Like, that's crazy to me, bro. So the idea that, you know, a fight that was probably anywhere between 9-3 and 11-1 the first time, when we're framing it like, well, you never know what the judges are going to do. Like, we need to assume competence. You know what I'm saying? Like we need to hope that we're doing better this time. That makes us look not that legit when we're like, well, you don't know what they're going to turn out. So let's start rationalizing how, you know, we don't know how any of these fights are going to turn out. There's no way for us to gauge who's winning a fight because everyone sees something different.
Well, that's a great point, because that kind of framed this in what's the point of a specialist? Like, what's the point of a commentator? Was like, maybe not intentionally, but that was kind of my first thought, was like, wait, if you're saying like the judges based on what are they seeing, then what's the point of a telecast? If we're just going to refer back to, hey, we don't know what's going on. It just kind of set it in this weird thing where I'd rather, like, why not focus on maybe the revenge angle from both guys? You know, both guys feel wronged, and we never heard.
Or just focus on like calling the fight accurately, you know?
This was a weird telecast. We'll get into it. Man K Crazy, our guy, ESPN didn't even make a promo, just a 5-minute training video. Did you notice that the main ad on the ring, it was for the Keyshawn Davis fight? I did notice that. Also, Shoeshine Boxing, what up, Lukie? I mean, everybody in the chat, what did you think of the fight? Did you find this an entertaining fight? Did you find it a good fight? I think that it was a closer fight. I think it was closer because whether or not Shock will say it, I think in his head he felt as though he had to be more aggressive and he had to kind of punish and beat up Hobson to win, or maybe that
right.
was
And just to add to what we were talking about before, I don't think the story should have been, you never know what the judges are going to do. The story should have been that Shock clearly won the first one. It's one of the all-time bad decisions. And here we are again. What's going to be the adjustment, as opposed to framing it like, well, he has to adjust. Like, if there's anybody competent scoring that fight, he doesn't have to adjust fucking nothing, bro. That's the whole point. That's why the sanctioning body actually did their job and mandated a fucking rematch.
Well, and that's also why it's so important that Bobby was like, I remember I asked him, I go, what do you think of, like, what does he have to do different? And he basically said what you said. If we had competent judges that scored the fight, he doesn't have to do a damn thing different, because he
wins that fight and he keeps up moving up and up and up. You know what I'm saying?
I guess what's a shame is, to me, O'Shaquie Foster is genuinely one of the 20 most interesting fighters right now in the sport of boxing. And this rematch sort of just stalled out an interesting 2024 for him. You know, he started
but I have to be honest, you know, this was a closer fight. It's not like he went in and dominated again and sort of like doubled down on it. It was a closer fight. And some of that is obviously Conceicao, but I think some of it is, like you said, the emotion of the fight, the approach to the fight, the fact that he's maybe not thinking about winning rounds as much, and he's really thinking about, sitting down on hard shots when he gets the opportunity.
Looked like he was going for damage.
Yeah, when he was sitting down, he was really trying to put something on it, or he was trying to do the speed thing, which I kind of wanted more from him, to be honest. But it did feel like when he was throwing, he was trying to, put the hurt on him.
Yeah, it's just strange because it was a fight that I think both of us were so invested in, because we had seen the first one, and it kind of flew under the radar, to be honest. I mean, like for us hardcore fight guys, we watched it, but I just don't feel like it got the fight week justice that it really should have. It didn't, like, for example, not to crap on this, but we have Keyshawn Davis, rising star, silver medalist. He's not a world title holder, but he's having a more grandiose fight week than a world title fight, and I get stars, etc. But that still just kind of rubs me wrong that a world title fight got presented kind of in a second tier format to a certain degree.
Yeah, that's a great point. It plays into the, if the goal is views and screen time and people watching exclusively, if it's not a sport first, you're going to have fights. It's a popularity contest. It's not an athletic contest as far as, what gets distribution.
Let's go to our guy, Raymond Danger Muratalla. He had the performance he's been waiting on for a while.
I mean, he was a killer, bro. He looked fantastic. I mean, the guy kind of played into everything he does well and was very hittable. But he was also a guy that just beat Jojo Diaz. I mean, there's a lot to like there from Muratalla. I still, want to see him in with some more technical type of guys. But there was nothing, everything about this win, checked the boxes.
I mean, to me, it's like, it's clear he's a top 10 guy. I think it's also clear that he might have problems if he can't get to the inside on people. But if he gets to that mid-range and he starts to get his timing, that right hand will land. It's not a matter of if. When he gets guys timing and he's hanging in that mid-range, he is a mid-range assassin.
Yeah, and he does it fast. He's got really fast hands. He's super explosive. He kind of changes his speed up. There's a lot to like, man. I mean, this was a complete blowout against a guy with a little bit of momentum.
And I think it was much needed because he had that fight against the Wasp earlier this year, which was really not impressive. And then his last fight against Tevin Farmer, a lot of people were down on him. I think that Tevin's really good. So that fight wasn't really shocking to me.
I didn't see that as a bad win. We're seeing him up against a different type of style, and styles make fights. And, by the end of the fight, he was basically dominant, not in terms of rounds, but he was dominant in terms of the tactics. It looked like he had, Farmer with kind of at the end of his rope. So, when you close strong on a fight like that, even if it takes you a minute, like if that's 12, maybe he stops him, and then what are people saying?
Well, that fight also to me showed me that Muratalla has a level of mental toughness that I think a lot of young fighters lack, that he was able to go down rounds and not doubt himself, and that he was able to make those adjustments. I guess a contrary person could say, well, maybe Tevin was older and the adjustment was, well, that's still an adjustment. He didn't mentally check out of a fight. Right. Or very early on in that fight, he didn't have specific answers to what Tevin Farmer was doing. And that could have gone a very bad way for him.
Yeah, but he stayed switched on and he figured it out. I remember through the first half, he was probably down 3-2 or 4-1, and then it felt like he, completely dominated the back half. So, and the real truth is, if you just step to him and you're right in front of him, he's going to dominate you. That's really the big thing.
Is there a better inside fighter right now at lightweight? Who would you say is more dangerous on the inside, him or Zepeda?
I mean, I feel like Zepeda, there's a relentlessness to him. It's like a different type of thing. Muratalla is a little more thoughtful and he places everything real nice, whereas Zepeda, there's like a recklessness element, you know what I mean, where he's doing kind of unorthodox shit. The other thing too, I mean, not for nothing, this is not a bad opponent, but I feel like at this point in the game, I would like to see him in some, some more 50-50 type fights like the Tevin Farmer fight.
And I think that he earned it, right? Because I mean, in theory, he had looked, quote unquote, on paper, not the greatest in his last two fights. Then he fights a guy that just beat JoJo. and he did this type of performance. So I don't really think you can move him back now. I think he has to get into a 50-50 fight, and there's guys there. And I mean, I think that really it's a collision course for him and Keyshawn Davis. If Keyshawn Davis were to win, I think that's a fight next year.
Love that matchup, bro. I mean, honestly, too, like, I just feel like at this point, somebody like Shakur, if I'm just talking purely boxing, right? But not the business. But I feel like someone like Shakur or Tank should take this guy on, man.
Well, and that's kind of where boxing's kind of hitting a roadblock. And maybe it's generational, but I hate it. Is the older champions, it felt like, would take on a Muratalla that put together an impressive run, that the fans are like, okay, this is a young guy emerging. And I don't want to use the word they'd grant them an opportunity, but they'd give them the chance to become a bigger name in the sport. So then more people would be aware of who they are. And then they could make good fights with other guys coming up. And it feels like guys like Muratalla and Arnold Barbosa and a lot of these guys, people just won't give them opportunities, and they kind of gloat about not giving them opportunities. And it just stagnates everything.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I mean, provided that Zepeda does beat Tevin Farmer, which I think he probably will, that's kind of the fight that I want to see. If it's not going to be Tank, if it's not going to be Shakur, and if it's not immediately going to be Keyshawn, I think that's kind of the fight that I think would be at least the most interesting.
And that's a fight.
Yeah, that's a fight right there, bro. That's maybe a rivalry.
I think with Muratalla, I think it's easy to underestimate what he does well, because I think a lot of people call a guy a good boxer if they're on their back foot in boxing, but he is using angles really well. He's very, very destructive with his punching. He places his shots well. He's
a lot like Mikey. He's a lot like Mikey Garcia.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. See, the problem is, I feel like when people make comparisons, they look at one elite trait, like that right hand, and they'll be like, oh, he doesn't have the same whatever. But I mean, he's very technically sound, but he has that Mexican style of, he's not going to just be a finesse fighter, but there's a level of cerebral intelligence to what he's doing. Here's a hot take for the aggregators. Can Raymond Muratalla get the momentum Mikey Garcia had when he was with Top Rank? Can he be that type of fighter?
I think he can if he gets a fight or two that's a big fight at 135. I think he's a really great player to add to the mix at 140 at some point. Like, I don't see why not.
You want to know another thing I like about him? He's not embarrassing.
We love that, dude.
He's a guy that shows up. He gives very boring interviews. I wish they were a little more interesting. Shows up, nothing crazy, no cringe, makes weight, and then he puts on good fights. Maybe we're just getting old, but it's nice having fighters that aren't cringy.
It's great. It's great. It's nice. That's what we were talking about with Better Beef and Beevil. I think it was nice just having like some athletes, Yeah,
like we don't get like this is my favorite rap song line, but I'm going to say it, but I'm going to act like it's just I made it up, and then look shocked when people go, oh, that's a line from this song. And they go, oh, I didn't know that.
And then like cut to a shot of like Carson Daly or whatever. Yeah,
I mean, even with our guy Regis, like the promo standing on business was a little hard to take. It's a little rough, right?
Not great.
It's not, and it's you can just feel it's going to age bad.
Yeah.
You can just feel in 10 years from now, it's not going to be a cool promo.
No.
Our guy Abraham Nova fought Humberto Galindo. I actually rewatched this fight, so I have some fresh takes on this. Are you ready for my fresh takes?
I'm ready, dude.
Okay, so one of them is, I think Humberto Galindo, I was there when he dropped Raymond Muratalla. In the words of Dakota, when Neri dropped Nao Inoue, that wasn't a flash knockdown, bub. So he actually dropped Muratalla good. Do you remember that? I don't know if you saw that, but he dropped him, and it was a good knockdown. And then Muratalla became one of my guys because he got up, was losing rounds, and then he stopped him later in the fight. And I'm like, oh, that's a guy, right? He got his get back. First off, I think Nova felt the power and started to try to counter the counter. And in this fight, Bradley made a good point where it was like, Galindo was trying to counter off of what Nova was doing. Nova was waiting for Galindo to start, so inherently they're just going to be moving and doing foot feints, etc. But it kind of is on like the higher profile, higher trajectory fighter to initiate a little bit and then look to set traps. And I guess what was hard for me in this fight was, and I wonder if there's a level of athlete's depression for Nova going into this fight, because he's coming off of a fight with Andreas Cortez. Many people feel that he won. BoxRec feels he won. A lot of people feel he won. And now you're going in with a very dangerous opponent, a guy who's actually fought and had success at higher weights, who came down. And it's hard to not think, okay, if I win this, maybe I can get back in a good fight. And I think that it was a blend of the power of Galindo mixed with, was his mind fully aware of just how grueling and difficult this opponent was until he got in the ring, and then he realized he was in a real fight. And maybe that he wasn't able to switch on that way.
Well, and to be honest with you, for me in this one, it's just like when he got hit super clean. So how much of that is that Galindo is a relatively accurate guy? How much of it that Nova just wasn't as sharp? You know, I just feel like in the last couple of fights, and even in the Cortez fight, I felt like he was just getting hit more than he needed to. You know, he would box and control the ring in stretches, and then he would get clocked, and it's like it just made it tough to score rounds for him sometimes. And also I couldn't help but notice that he never really broke a sweat. And so you have to wonder if you're not reacting well, if you're not sharp on your defense and you're not breaking a sweat, does that have something to do with, you know, your weight or whatever? It was worth noting, you know, that through a 10-round fight, he was basically dry.
And I think it's tough, right? Because a guy like Humberto Galindo is a real guy, right? His record doesn't say it, but he always comes to win. He's tough. He's got power. So it's actually, to fight a guy like this in this position is a compliment. It's saying you're quite a high level fighter, because this is, what would you say, Dakota, top 25 level guy in the division. So you're fighting a guy who might not be known to the fans, but you're not really moving that much further down. You're fighting a guy that basically, from this type of competition, you could get into a title fight or a title eliminator, because you're basically taking a high level guy. I'm not sure what I saw, but I was a little surprised at what I saw. And it just makes me wonder moving forward what we will see moving forward, because it feels like something to take note of, right? Because this is when guys, I guess another thing, it's just momentum, right? This is a thing I should talk about, momentum. So, you know, he loses to Robisi. He rebuilt his momentum. He gets those wins over Adam Lopez. He gets himself into the Shock Foster fight. Even the Shock Foster fight, split decision. Good champion. You can say
really good performance.
Good performance. There's nothing wrong with that one, right? If anything, that makes his momentum go even further, because it's like, this guy, he's an uncrowned champion, or he's right up there. The Cortez fight, I feel like, really hurt his momentum, because no matter how you scored the fight, I think he thought that he won the fight. So now how do you handle that one, which that was the first time in his career, maybe the second, you could say, off the Foster, but even though he didn't win the Foster fight, I think you can leave feeling okay. The knockout loss, you know, I think that might have been a weight class thing. He's a big guy going to featherweight, etc. This is that Cortez fight is the first one where I think he left the ring maybe feeling bitter, maybe feeling like, I should have won this fight. And those things, when you hit momentum and you hit those tough points in your career, that can be some of the hardest things as a professional to fight through, is just that, because it feels like you're fighting a system, even if you're not, just battling your brain in those moments. And I wonder if a little bit of that came into this fight.
Well, it does seem like, you know, just watching, it did look like he felt like he won. You know what I mean? Like, it felt like he was, because the thing wasn't like the volume from Galindo was anything crazy. It was just like when he would throw, he was landing cleanly. But for large stretches, it was Nova kind of moving and jabbing and countering. And so maybe he just felt like he won. But even if that's the case, it's like you do kind of have to reassess, how you're thinking through fights and how you're, responding defensively.
But I think the other thing too is volume. Like he should have won this fight, but the punch output, like maybe 10, 20 punches more, win a couple of rounds here. To me, I was surprised, and maybe I'm an old school guy, but there was a low output, and the only reason I can expect a low output is the power of the other guy. You get hit with a really good shot like we saw in the Schofield fight. All of a sudden, guys become counter punchers. So let's move to our guy, Jahi Tucker. What did you think of Jahi Tucker? He took on my friend Kilo the Kid Madera, Callisto Madera, two tough guys who fought everybody. Loving Jahi's career. You tell me what you thought.
Man, I thought it was a good performance, bro. I think that Jahi doesn't always do things like traditionally or how you might do it like from the textbook, but he has a way. He's really learning his range, and he has a way of getting in and out and using good head movement. He slips and he rolls a lot of punches, and he's very accurate. He's gotten really accurate over the last couple of fights. And he was fighting a really competent guy. I just like what I saw, man. He ultimately dominated the fight, and this was one too where I really like Tim Bradley. I have a lot of respect for him as a fighter and all that, but it just felt like he was kind of hating on the kid a little bit, and I'm not entirely sure why. I know that Jahi has got a little spiciness to him, a little spunk to him, but if you ever interact with him, he's like a really nice kid. And he's not, like we were talking about with Muratalla, he's not like embarrassing. So I don't know. I just think there's so much to like about him, and I hope that people are enjoying, a kid who's really willing to take risky fights and is doing a pretty good job of developing at a good pace. He's not maybe going to have a perfect record when it's all said and done, but I just think he's getting better and better.
I mean, he's my type of fighter, right? I think that like in the sports, my issue with sports right now is everyone kind of fights the same. Everyone in golf has the same golf swing. A lot of basketball players just chuck up threes. We're kind of losing personalities in sports. And I think part of it is just like people go to these programs, these AAUs, USA boxing, golf camps, and they learn how to do everything the same. And the thing I love about Jahi Tucker is he kind of reminds me of one of those old school fighters that does things sort of fundamentally wrong, but they work for him and they become iconically his own. Now, the question is, will he be able to get away with it at the highest level of the sport?
Mm-hmm.
Or will that hold him back? And if he is able to get away with it at the highest level of the sport, we are looking at possibly an iconic fighter, because these are the type of guys that are able to do things that other people tell their friends on the schoolyard when they're in 6th grade. Hey, did you see this guy that did this little wiggle and kept his hands low and punched? And that's why a lot of young fighters want to keep their hands low, because they remember those schoolyard conversations and how cool it was. He has that type of potential to me, but I'm not sure where he's going. But Kilo the Kid Madera, by the way, used to be signed to Top Rank. It was a while ago, but he was.
He's a good fighter.
This is a real guy. This is like what, Jahi's 5th real guy he's fought as a prospect. I mean, okay, here, aggregators, get ready for this one. This is a big one. Jahi Tucker has fought better competition than I'm sure at least one world champion out there. He has fought better competition than I bet you we could find a world champion that has fought a softer schedule than Jahi Tucker. And I'm always going to cheer for young fighters who could take a safe route and are taking real fights to develop themselves to try to get the best out of their skill set, as opposed to what's the safest way? How can I manipulate the system?
And honestly, the last couple of fights, I just feel like he's getting hit a lot less. So he's right in the pocket, but he's really not taking a lot of punishment. He's just been very sharp. We were talking about this the other day, right? It's like Sergio Martinez fought with his hands down below his waist, almost to his knees. And I bet if Sergio Martinez was fighting on this slot on the card, Tim Bradley would be talking about his hands being down. But because he's a world champion, now you got to go, listen, this guy's just a little different. And we'll see if Jahi has that kind of moment.
I mean, to me, very exciting. And if you're not watching Jahi, you need to start watching Jahi. And he needs to be a main card fighter pretty soon. the level of entertainment he is bringing. And I kind of want Jahi. I think after the fight, what happened, like they talked for a little bit, but then I think that he calmed down. Like he's always been a pretty good gentleman of things too, which is what I also like about Jahi is he runs a little spicy in the ring, but then he's like the minute it's over, it's like back to being a normal person. I always like guys that can switch it on and off. I've always kind of held a grudge with guys that can't flip that switch and stay being jerks after the fight because that kind of makes our sport just look stupid, right? We kind of look like we're already kind of like a criminal sport. You and me can't go to the park and like, let's box. Someone calls the cops and we get arrested for assault, right? I've always liked that, but I think Jahi's promising. Let's go to Floyd Schofield beating Rene Tellez Giron. What did you think when you saw this fight?
Yeah, so he got hurt in the 3rd and the 11th. And it felt like other than that, he basically dominated the fight. And he's fighting a pretty tough guy, for a 22-year-old kid coming up. I felt like it was a really good performance. I think there's a lot to like, and I think that there's a lot to work on. I thought the corner was way too intense. And I think, we look at a guy like Bobby Benton with Shock. I just think he needed something a little bit more measured. They needed to let Ronnie take the lead on that a little bit more. It just felt like Pops was a little too hot for, how dominant he was. You're not going to get it all right in one night. And it just didn't seem like it was helping his confidence.
Yeah, it was a unique situation, and I've talked with Floyd, both senior and junior, and I think it's tricky, right? Because I think his dad knows what he's doing to a certain extent. Like, I think his daddy is a good coach, and it's obvious that he's brought him through. But I think that the problem with father-son dynamics in boxing is there's so much invested. The fathers put so much of their life into this that sometimes their emotion in what they want to see in the fight, they unknowingly or knowingly, but I think in this case, unknowingly, their emotion in that moment carries over to their son. And it's a blended relationship of trainer and father. And I think that becomes a little confusing, and that brings a different level of tension. And maybe that's what you're speaking to.
Well, because there's one level where it's like, well, I know him better than anyone else. I know what's going to motivate him, this and that, and this and that. There's another part of it where it's like, at a certain point, you can't see the forest from the trees. And you just got to get some new voices, some new, and that's why he's got Ronnie there, which I commend him for having, another voice.
Real boxing guy, a real boxing guy. And I think that speaks to that his dad knows what he's doing.
Absolutely.
Because if he didn't know what he was doing, Ronnie wouldn't be there. And then after the fight, they announced they're going to bring in Juan Guzman, which is another real boxing guy. So that's a great. So like they're doing the right things. My big takeaway is not anything. The big takeaway for me is I think we're just unrealistic with 22-year-old fighters.
Yeah, bro, he's mad young. Like he is a grown man, but like he's mad young. He's a 22-year-old guy. He's gonna develop as a person and as a fighter. He's already had like a decent number of fights. He's fighting a tough kind of veteran, tricky guy. I don't know, bro. I think there's a lot to like.
Yeah, Shoeshine was at the fights. He said he sat with Schofield's family. Great guy. Took a lot of risks with this fighter. I think that we just expect too much of young fighters. I think there's a ton to like about Floyd Schofield. I think that because like these kids, right? They grow up and they do social media. So they call out guys like Shakur and stuff because that's like what they do. It's like a video game. You call out a famous person and now you get mentioned and you get stories written. It's just the young person thing. I'm not as big of a fan of it, but it's just, I understand that's what people do nowadays. That being said, I don't think that we can expect guys that are 22 years old. Yes, he had a good amateur career, but this was his first 12-round fight. It was a fine enough fight. And like some people were like, oh, he got dropped. Well, he's an offensive fighter, and this was a big step up in class.
He does have to learn to control his emotion and his tempo a little more. You just got to be more consistent.
But Dakota, how much is that experience and age? Like I don't even think that's.
I think that's a lot of it, but I also think it's possible that that's in his nature. And if it is, I don't know. He needs to find a trainer that's not going to be constantly fighting with that element.
Because it's going to go one of two ways, right? The father is going to be like a perfect genius at this, and he's going to control it and know how to work it. Or there's going to be a night where things go bad and the emotion gets very heavy in that corner and things just get out of control. I don't think that corner situation is ever going to be neutral. I think when you get to the big fight, it's either going to be spectacular and work, or it's just going to go downhill because it's that extreme, in my opinion. But I'm going to be real. I don't know which way it's going to go right now because I've seen situations like that where the father does know how to push those buttons and gets the most out of the kid in those big fights. So I'm not going to just say it. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough to tell, but I think he's a talented kid.
He's talented, and I just think we expect a lot of these young fighters, right? He's headlining a fight. He has a good performance. He gets dropped in this era.
He's headlining, he's headlining a fucking card that's got an undisputed fight on it.
Headlining a card that had an undisputed fight on it. And, I think let's call it for what it is. A lot of fight fans are used to seeing prospects in uncompetitive fights, right? So when you put a prospect in with a competitive fight, guys can get dropped. Guys can get rocked.
You're moving them fast.
Yeah. So, I think part of the criticism is just that this guy's taking real fights and challenging fights. And people are used to guys just hand selecting and picking opposition that make them look good.
Hey, listen, he might fuck around and lose a fight at some point. That doesn't mean it's the end of the fucking world. Look at Jahi, look at a ton of really good fighters.
Well, we just got to get over that losing a fight matters because like a guy like this, even if he loses a fight, he's got a good style. He's willing to jump in there. He's saying he wants to fight for legacy and he wants to do this. I do think
his hands are fast as shit, bro. His hands are fast as shit.
Hands are fast. He hits hard. Seems like he's got a good mentality. Seems like he works extremely hard. His body looks like he trains really hard. A lot to like, right? But at the same time, he's 22 years old. Is it realistic to hold him to the standard of those guys? So I think that all things being said, this was a big step up in competition. This is a guy that had beaten a lot of really good fighters. He had beaten a couple of guys, fringe contenders recently, and he beat Carlos.
Say he was a fringe contender.
Which one?
I would say he himself was a fringe contender.
Yeah, Tellez Giron had built himself to a fringe contender, and this was a real fight with a guy that knew he could take Floyd Schofield's power. So, I think the bigger thing was I'm not sure Schofield had fought a guy that was as comfortable taking his shots ever in a pro fight. And I think that also is experience. Experience is weird because you can't buy it. It's a corny expression that people always say, but you really can't buy experience. And sometimes the fights that people look at as like, oh, that wasn't his best outing. Sometimes those fights make world champions. And the fights that people look at and go, oh man, he's a special fighter. I look at them and go, that fight was useless.
At the same time, those stretches where he kind of goes into war mode, he does take a lot of punishment. So and for a young guy that's got that skill set, you don't want to have to put miles on that meter if you don't have to.
Well, and that's going to be, I think, what we start watching is what is the damage he's taken and how willing is he to trade with people? Because that's
and is that his nature? And is he that aggressive in nature, or is that something that he can ultimately use when he has to, as opposed to go into it in times where he really doesn't?
Okay, really quickly, we're gonna go to Beck the Bully. What did you think of your guy Beck the Bully on this card?
I'm gonna let you take the lead on this one, bro. I didn't see this one.
Well, this is gonna be a short segment. He didn't look all that good. Everything about this fight was weird. I thought I never got super clarity on this, but I thought it was a WBA super middleweight eliminator fight. Beck the Bully weighs in at 170. Stevens weighs in at below 68, so he was eligible. Beck wasn't. Given that Stevens had been knocked out by Joshon James in a round and Beck the Bully's reputation, I think a lot of people were expecting this to be over quick. Instead, Stevens really put it on him in the early rounds. Once again, Beck the Bully's eye got cut. Once again, Beck the Bully had blood from his nose. He won the fight based on a left hand from round 7 through 12, but he couldn't keep his hands up, in my opinion.
He never does, though.
But I mean, this fight, it was really... He did that, like, remember when Heather Hardy used to fight and she couldn't keep her hands up in that second half of the fight? Like, this one was like, I know he doesn't usually hold his hands up, but this was that special kind where, like, it feels like your shoulders are kind of burning. And he just looked like Shoeshine said, he just underperformed and looked gassed. Stevens had a drink at the bar with my boy after, no damage. So Stevens out there just meeting the fans. I mean, it really felt like David Stevens missed out on winning this fight. This felt like a fight that Stevens should have won, but at times he was just looking to land big power shots and letting Beck the Bully outwork him with shots that I don't think Stevens thought hurt, but they landed as scoring punches. It ended up being a split decision. Really, to me, I think it's hard to see Beck the Bully as a title contender at this point. He's had basically 2 subpar performances this year. He had that cut, and now we're starting to see themes with his career cuts and a lot of different things. So I don't really know where
he's just lacking some direction too. Like you were saying, I don't really know where you go with him, but I feel like he is kind of meandering. And there was a time where he was like sort of a hot prospect, and I'm not sure, especially at 168, like what is the direction you're trying to take this guy? Are you ready to throw him in with Caleb Plant if he gets the opportunity? You ready to throw him in with Iglesias?
I mean, he was a guy that came out with the boogeyman aura, and it was like, oh my God, he's going to fight Kovalev. That was his announcement. It was like, he's going to fight Kovalev, and all the smart people are like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I think he's going to win. So that was like and then Kovalev couldn't fight him for whatever reason. And then Rosado knocked him out. And even though I believe this is 8th win since that fight, it really feels like it's hard to forget that Rosado knocked him out that bad. Like, he's a guy where it almost feels like since that knockout, just a piece of his confidence is gone.
Sure. But I mean, like, guys come back from that too. Like, Amir Khan got knocked out and had a career.
But what I'm saying is I haven't seen him come back from him.
Yeah.
From that.
Yeah.
If he's in with guys that he has physical advantages over, he looks good. But when he was back in with Rosado, he was not the guy that we're used to seeing. He was a safety first fighter. In this fight, he never threw body shots, and I think that's because Stevens was throwing jabs and straight right hands at him when he tried to throw to the body, and he didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, Shoeshine, I wouldn't be mad seeing him and Pacheco.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know, because I think I wouldn't say he's losing his confidence, but he's lost that aura. And now he's just feeling like a guy that's out there. And this was really, I think, supposed to be a statement fight. And instead, I think it really raised the value of David Stevens in the division, because Stevens really kind of just beat him up. He just didn't score enough points to win the fight.
Yeah, maybe he should fight Yohan.
Who, Beck?
Yeah.
That might be it. That might be a fight. Let's go to Fundora. Fundora's the undisputed champion. What were your thoughts?
I mean, she's fantastic, bro. There's so many things to like: the height, the range, the fact that she knows how to use it maybe a little better than her brother. She clearly is a destructive puncher as far as women's boxing goes. And she was in with a good fighter who I actually, based on the highlights that I saw, I thought it was going to be a kind of an ass whooping. And she had a tough time with Alaniz for the first 3-4 rounds. It took her a minute to kind of get her rhythm. And then to see her take out, a fighter who you could see really knew what she was doing, it was super impressive. I think she's working on being, I think she is a pound for pound type of fighter. And I think she's working on being, one of the most exciting fighters in women's boxing, particularly where it feels like she could have a weight ceiling, a weight range like Amanda Serrano has.
If we wanted to piss people off, right, and we sometimes do that, would you put her in a pound for pound list with male fighters? Is she one of the 10 best fighters in the world right now to you?
I think it's a little early for that, to be honest with you. I mean, she's very young. This was a great win. She's had a couple of great wins. The Christina Cruz win was a great win as well. But I just think it's a little early for that, my opinion.
That knockout,
And also the sometimes the talent pool in the divisions, you can get the belts a little faster. It's not to take away from her accomplishment, but I think it's just for context.
it's a little faster, right? There's not as many fighters. It's a little faster to get there. I will say this knockout win, one of the most destructive women's knockouts I've ever seen. Like the way that left landed, and it like the best expression I can say for those that didn't see it is it's like the left hand landed and it like exploded on a. How would you describe it, Dakota?
It was just right on the button. It was one of those right on the button joints.
Then the way she went down, she's not getting up. It was like when Sergio Martinez landed on Paul Williams in the second fight, and the ref is counting, and it's like, we don't need to count anymore. Like, he's not getting up.
Well, and she started getting up, to her credit.
She did, but you could tell that she wasn't there. That was the heart of a champion. That was the heart of a champion. And it was kind of like one of those like statement knockdowns too, because earlier in like a sequence before, Aline's was dropped and she said, it was my foot. It was my foot. And then it's like almost like Fundora said, okay, think that?
She got hit though,
But then that was the right on the kisser. What did you think of her speech afterwards? Because I felt like that's like a star moment, and I hope Golden Boy runs with it, that she proclaimed that she's the Golden Girl and kind of said that Golden Boy is ushering in a new era of fighters. And she basically said she's part of that era. It felt like she's now a main event fighter, in my opinion, and it feels like she's someone that they should really get behind.
I think she's definitely a main event fighter on this card. Listen, I know Schofield's a rising star, but at a minimum, I feel like she's the co-main at a minimum. And I personally think that she is a main event fighter.
Yeah, so I mean, I think she left who would you say? I guess we should do this segment maybe starting now. Who won the weekend?
You do your take first, and I'm gonna go get some water real quick.
Okay, so we're gonna say who won the weekend is gonna be my take, and then we're gonna do the preview for the next. And I would say who won the weekend. I would say the winner of the weekend would be Gabriela Fundora, because it seems like she is now a star in women's boxing. It seems like she is now a marquee attraction for Golden Boy Promotions. Solid interview, came out with a great speech after, highlight reel knockout to become the youngest undisputed champion ever, male or female, flyweight undisputed. She can grow, she can move up in weight. I think that having that type of performance against a fighter who had never really been beaten, Alenz's only loss was a controversial loss to Marlon Esparza. Having that performance against that type of fighter, and then having almost a prepared speech that she said, that was a big one. Dakota, who won the weekend for you?
I mean, I think it would probably have to be Fundora, but ultimately, I'll give Fundora the runner-up. To me, the winner of the weekend is Shock. I'm glad he got a little justice on that first fight, even if this was a closer fight, even if it wasn't maybe his best work. I'm glad that they got it right. I felt like he won the fight. I felt like it was a 7-5, 8-4 kind of fight. I thought his work was cleaner. I thought his defense was sharp. Maybe the tactics weren't the best, but he really didn't take a whole lot of clean shots in this fight. And I felt like, he got the win that he deserved.
I was in tabs hell, so I was trying to find the right tab to get us back. So
we're still here, bro. We're still here.
ESPN Plus this Thursday. Our guy Iglesias is back. He's taking on Petro Ivanovich. Our guy Milo loves it. It's
speaking very highly of this guy.
Speaking highly of this guy, man. He said, Bub, he's very, very high on this Ukrainian guy. He's only fought in Germany and Ukraine. The record is not what you'd love, but this is a 4-star box rec match. Very, very exciting. And I also think that it's a fight that It gets me excited because Iglesias gives kind of David Morrell vibes. Exciting, fun puncher. Love an exciting, fun puncher. So, are you tuning into this one?
Absolutely, bro. I think Iglesias is going to be a part of the future of 168, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in. Hopefully this is a good matchup, but I'm looking forward to seeing him with, Pacheco and Berlanga and Caleb Plant and some of the guys that are in the mix at this weight right now.
Hot take. Is it too late to call him a prospect? Because it feels like if he could be labeled a prospect, he should be the prospect of the year.
It's so tough, right? Prospect means something different. The later some of these like professional amateurs go actually pro, and but I would say he's still a prospect.
Yeah, I mean it's just the term prospect is so confusing.
I think in general, prospect, you have to look at it as professional experience, even if there is a high level amateur. So was Vasily Lomachenko a prospect, in his fourth fight when he's a world champion? I don't know, probably not. But in the vast majority of cases, I think that, you are still a prospect. Like Andy Cruz is a prospect.
Yeah, it's interesting. So let's get to the big fight of the weekend. That is Keyshawn Davis versus Gustavo Lemos. Real fight, real fight. It's on a Friday night, so don't forget that, guys. Don't tune in Saturday and miss it. What are your initial thoughts on this lightweight match?
I love this matchup. I'm excited actually to see Lemos at a lower weight. It felt like he was much smaller than Hitchens, even though he was very much in that fight. That was such a flip a coin fight. Love the one of the big things for me on Keyshawn, bro, is like Jahi. I just love that he's taking good fights, bro. I just like that he's taking good matchups. He's really going out of his way to fight tough guys. And this guy gave another rising star, the Floyd Castillo treatment a little bit. And I think it's a great matchup, bro.
Yeah, I like the mentality of Keyshawn, right? I like that it's a hometown fight. He's going to be spread very thin, right? Because that he's going to be obligated to carry the card. It's him and his brothers on the card.
And guy's no joke. This guy's no joke that he's fighting.
And he's probably going to punch harder at his real weight class, and he's coming with a good motor. And I think the thing that I've been concerned about Keyshawn Davis has been he's stuck between two styles. I think that his most effective style is a come forward guy, almost like a downhill running back, like Lamont Jordan for the Raiders. When he goes downhill and he's putting punches together and he's kind of blocking, I think his best version is like a more advanced Lamont Peterson, where he's kind of coming in, catching, shooting, throwing back, and just kind of annihilates people that way. But at times he wants to box, and against guys that he's more athletic than or has advantages over, I think he can do it. But one flaw in that is, I think with a guy like Lemos, if you get caught between styles, this is the guy that will outwork you. So what I want to preface is, this is a fight to me to find out what Keyshawn's identity is in the ring, because I don't think you can.
I think that was like a really skeptical way of saying he's versatile, right? He can do a lot of different things, but I do think you're right to some extent that if he makes it exclusively like a back foot fight, that Lemos could get, a little bit of a snowball effect going.
Well, I think versatility is a two-way street, right? I think it's good to be able to do a lot of things, but then there's a thing called maturity, and you understand what's most effective for you, and then you can adjust, right? So there's levels to being a good fighter.
Right. It's like Josh Kelly being good at everything and really not picking a single one of them for long straight. You know what I mean?
I'll tell you, like a boxing coach I had, Ben Baptista, said to me, it was like you could have a shotgun, a 45, a sniper rifle, and he'd name off a bunch of guns. But then you got this one guy that just has a Colt 45 or whatever, and he's more effective because he knows if he just pulls it out and he gets to a certain range, he can shoot you. Whereas this other guy's got the sniper rifle and he's got all these tools, but he doesn't ever know when to use what tool where. So sometimes versatility can get you because you can be stuck with a deer in the headlights trying to figure out what tool to use, whereas a more limited guy like Lemos knows, hey, I just got to be in shape. I'm coming forward. I'm going to try to break him down. He knows he's got his 45 on him.
Yeah, it's a great matchup, bro.
It's a real fight. And I think that a lot of people probably naively are going to look at this and go, oh, yeah, Keyshawn's going to win. And this is a real fight. And I really applaud Keyshawn for taking a fight like this, because I don't think a guy like Lemos, young fighters are really excited to fight him after what he did with Richardson Hitchens.
Yeah, bro. I mean, he's fighting this guy. He's fighting Pedraza. I mean, this is a young fighter who's, I mean, I think has one of the best. If you looked at guys his age, he's probably got one of the best resumes for a guy his age.
Our guy, Danny the Boxing Man from Boxing Twitter. Funny thing is, when it was rumored that Rayo was offered the Tank fight at 135, people were saying he was trying to weight drain Rayo. But now no one is saying Keyshawn is doing that to Lemos. But wasn't Lemos originally a 35-pound fighter? I think he's originally a 35-pound fighter.
I believe so. Yeah, I think.
Let's fact check this. Let's fact check this, because we gotta. So I think that his whole career was at 135, but we're going to be factually specific. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, the majority of he bounced between. He's fought at 30. His most effective has been at 35. He beat Lee Selby by knockdown. The Razzle Dazzle Man he knocked out. Do you remember the Razzle Dazzle Man, Dakota?
Who's the Razzle Dazzle Man?
Lee Selby, the Razzle Dazzle Man.
I mean, I remember Lee Selby. I don't remember him. Was he
you
referring to himself that way?
You never heard that clip where they go, "It's the Razzle Dazzle Man, Lee Selby."
That's really laying it on thick.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not a good way to do it. But
good win though. That's a good win for him.
That's a good win. Let's see. So Rayo, I mean, I don't know, like Rayo offered
Lee Selby used to be like a junior featherweight. So that just to give you an idea of his best win, is against the guy who traditionally fought way lighter. Like I just think Lemos is naturally a lighter guy.
He is a naturally lighter guy. And I don't know. So I'm having trouble. Dan, I love you to death, but I'm having trouble making sense of the Rayo, because like Rayo, I guess he could probably still make 35, but he's just a big guy. And now he has
Rayo and Tio, bro. That's the fight.
But like he's a champion at 40. So I mean, unless you're offering him big money to fight at 35, that's a pretty big kid. Whereas like Lemos, I think 40 is probably the highest he can go, but he's naturally a little bit smaller. So, I mean, I think it's kind of more apples and oranges. The Rayo and Tank, those are more big name fighters. Lemos is more of like a tough, hardcore enthusiast guy, a tough fighter who I think a lot of people just don't want to fight, because no matter what, you're not going to catch him on an off night. He's a guy that's going to train really hard. He's going to probably give the worst interviews. He'll probably leave them. This is another thing to think about, Dakota. Keyshawn's probably going to do 30 to 40 minutes of media. Our guy Lemos is probably going to do about 5 minutes and then get to go to his room and chill. That stuff adds up.
Sure, absolutely.
Like Lemos is just going to basically be like, I don't speak English. Like one guy will be like, hey, what are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to give him my best. Probably intentionally give you some really bad quotes, and then he'll be out of there. And it's like he can
call the day, baby.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing about fighting certain types of opponents. When you fight guys who don't help carry a promotion, they can really weaponize that and drain you to have to carry the show.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
So our guy, Troy Isley, will be taking on, guess who he's taking on? He's taking on Tyler Herc Howard. Do you know who trains Tyler Herc Howard?
I don't.
Bobby Benton.
Hey,
so
there we go.
This is a fun inside boxing matchup, because not just is Troy Isley an exciting fighter, two of our favorite coaches head to head. Bomac, Bobby Benton, two of the best American coaches out there in two different corners. So though I think that Troy has every advantage, most youth and kind of trajectory and everything in this fight, I think a neat thing will be seeing two of my favorite coaches giving insight in real time, which is a treat for me as a boxing purist.
Well, and based on the interview that we did with Troy a couple of months ago, if he's still on his 2-fight plan, the fight after this is going to be Janibek, and I think that that's a fight that I want to see. I think that it's the most interesting fight that Janibek will have taken to this point, and hopefully that's still on the table or in the works.
Well, and I also think that, like, if you want that fight, are we going to be real here?
We're always going to be real, then.
We're going to be real, okay. If you want that fight, you got to have a performance that says, I want that fight. So if Troy wants that fight, he's got to have the performance that says, hey, and I don't think that, so I think that if he wants to be on that trajectory, this performance has to be one that kind of, not just does he want that fight, I think the fans want that fight from this too.
Absolutely.
Other top-ranked fights on this undercard. We got our guy, Abdullah Mason. You love a little Abdullah Mason in your life. Another not embarrassing young fighter. We love it. He's taking on Yohan Vasquez. Look, I don't know a ton about Vasquez. I'm sure he's battle-tested. I'm sure he's a veteran. And I'm sure we're going to unfairly expect Abdullah Mason to do what he always does, which is make very talented fighters look extremely ordinary. To me, Abdullah Mason is not to overhype him, but he's passing all the check marks of looking like an extremely special fighter. And what's even better is he's not buying into social media. He's not embarrassing when you interview him. And it seems like he lives in the gym all the time. Really, really, really think the world of the Up and Smoke tour.
Well, and he's like, what, like a 19, 20-year-old guy. And I'm looking at BoxRec. He's fighting a guy that's 26-5 that went 10 rounds distance with Charlie Suarez that is coming off a knockout win over a 30-0 guy. So
yeah, it's a real fight. It's a real fight.
He's taking real fights.
And by the way, he's taking real fights and he's so good. We're just like, oh yeah, he'll probably stop him.
Yeah. I expect him to stop him.
And that's not unreal. I mean, is it unfair for us to just say that Abdullah Mason just seems very special?
I think at this point, it's a fair estimation. I'm not going to take it back if he has a hard fight either.
No, I that's called growth and development. So
yeah.
that just happens. What do you think of this Kelvin Davis Solando fight? Because I was looking over it. I need to probably do a little research on it right now, but it looks like a sneaky tough fight to me. So what are you expecting here?
I don't know a thing about this opponent. It says he went 10 with Myquan Williams. Not entirely sure what to make of Kelvin Davis. There's things to like, and then there's kind of lulls and moments where he's taking shots he doesn't need to take. But I think he is a very good fighter. I just haven't seen that thing yet.
To me, this fight determines if he can get to that next level. Albeit this is a guy coming off of 3 straight losses. He went 10, like you said, with Myquan Williams, had a split decision loss to Beto Palmetta, and then he was stopped in September of last year. So he's been out for a while. But I mean, I think this is also a fight where we need to see him on the scale, right? Because like we could say all these grandiose things, oh, this is a real fight, etc. We got to make sure this guy's in shape.
Didn't he have some weight issues the last fight as well, or at least recently?
Who? Kelvin?
Yeah.
Kelv, Night?
Yeah.
I can't remember. I hate to say it, man, and it's so messed up. I like my big Kelv. I liked him as an amateur, but it's like when he fights, Keyshawn's on the card, and a lot of my attention goes to his brother Keyshawn. So I remember Kelvin's kind of had an up and down pro career so far. He's gotten dropped, I know, at least once. And at times he he likes to bang with people. And it doesn't seem like maybe that's the path to victory he should be working on. It seems like he has a temperament where he created a nickname Night Night. And with that nickname Night Night, you need to get knockouts. And standing and trading with people, he seems to take some punches that he shouldn't. So it seems like he's playing with fire a little bit, but young fighter, and young people make changes fight to fight. And I believe he's still with Bomac and them, and that's a great team, and they get the most out of guys. So if he's going to do it, he's got the team to do it.
Absolutely, bro.
Okay, next fight that I wanted to discuss. Our guy, Yeis Solando. We love a little Yeis Solando. He's fighting on a top-ranked card, 10-round fight. Really, I don't expect this fight I expect Yeis to do well in the fight. But more so is I'm curious if Yeis might become someone we see in the top-ranked mix, where we've seen recently Angelo Leo fight on a top-ranked card and win a belt. We've seen guys like Rafael Espinoza, Luis Alberto Lopez, Rabisi Ramirez. We've seen all these guys under top-ranked broadcasts. If Yeis Solando is campaigning at featherweight, that would be another interesting guy in the mix.
Yeah, another great guy to throw in the mix.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring that up because I know we have some hardcore fight enthusiasts and they'd enjoy it. Okay, we've probably buried the lead completely because there's a fight that most people want to see. And I love this when they give us way too many fights one weekend. So it's like, okay, we've had nothing, but now here's the marathon. Giron Boots Innes is taking on Kieran. I can't even say his name. It's a rematch of a fight that Boots Innes pretty clearly won about 2 years ago almost now. And he won this fight because Harry Schroff was his eliminator and he beat him. So the IBF mandated him to fight Boots Innes in a fight that none of us wanted to see.
Lukie, we don't. Are we even going to talk about this one? I mean, this is such a nothing.
I mean, I think we should talk about the fact that we really enjoy Boots Innes and that he's a very interesting talent and we want to see him in good fights. And I think that the way we're hearing about things is there might be a really big fight for him in February, but there's going to probably be great atmosphere for this fight. And it's great that he's been active. He's gotten 2 fights in because that was something that plagued him was activity. But I'm probably about as big of a Boots Innes guy as possible. I can't even fake being interested because I want to see. The only thing I want to see is I want to see Boots show that he can adjust, cut off the ring, and kind of have a more dominant performance. But I'm probably going to be in and out of watching this fight. How
is Bam not the main event on this?
Well, I think that's just a where it's located. This is a Philly fight, and I think the Philly
fair enough. But I mean, come on, bro. We're talking about a guy. One guy hasn't had like a meaningful matchup yet, and the other guy is like a top 8 pound for pound guy now.
I think it's also the weight classes. There is a sizeism, and that's the weight classes. We'll just skip ahead, right? We'll skip ahead because that's about as much as we want.
Okay, just if we're in it, let's just get in it real quick. What does he do? What does he do? What's the big fight for him? Is it Mario Barrios? It's Stanionis. Neither of those are really big fights, but the biggest fights at the weight. Does he move up? Does he get Devin Haney or T.O. to move up to like what does this guy do to get a little, some eyes on him?
I don't know, but I want him to answer those questions this week. I want Boots to take this fight I'm not interested in and give us something to talk about and give us some direction to his career. That's what I want from this fight week. I want him to give us purpose and direction from this fight week. And if he doesn't do that, I will be frustrated. But that is basically my goal for this week is I want some sort of direction to his career because this one just sucks that this is a mandated opponent because this is not a guy. These sanctioning bodies really have to read the room and look at who are the fans excited to see, this is a rematch of a fight that was not competitive. And the only thing that was fascinating about it was Boots was unable to cut off the ring and land a big shot and knock this guy out. That was the only thing that was fascinating about the fight. He won every single round. The only fascinating thing was Boots went 12 rounds with the guy.
Touche. Well said.
Yeah, that's it. So Jesse Bam Rodriguez is taking on Pedro Guevara. He just beat one of the Maloney brothers. Betterish fight. My only observation is Bam sometimes has off performances against guys with lesser names and then looks like $1 million against the big stars. Any chance we see an off night from Bam? Because I remember what was it? The Canelo Triple G 3 card. He kind of had a guy that was turning with him and giving him.
Maybe, but this guy to me is really tough and he's really good, but I think he's hittable enough that Bam is going to have his way.
Kind of screams like a spectacular Bam knockout to me because of
But
the style.
and it's a real guy, you know, it's a real guy. There's a reason you should add it to the highlight reel, but I think it will be a highlight reel kind of fight. Even if it goes the distance, I just think he's going to dominate.
Oh, and by the way, Bam's a real guy. So not just is this a real guy, like Bam is one of the 8 best fighters in the world right now.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're keeping going. Your guy Ray Ford is on the card. He's taking on blast from the past Orlando Gonzalez in a 10-round fight. It's his debut at 130 pounds. Any thoughts on this? Because I feel like kind of not jumping into the deep end, but it's like there's 2 Ray Fords I've seen. There's the Ray Ford that loves to sit on the ropes and makes fights close. And there's the Ray Ford that we've seen in certain fights where he looks spectacular and unbeatable.
Listen, man, I'm here for it, bro. He's been talking about moving up since he won the title the first time against Artem. You know, the Nick Ball fight was a flip a coin kind of fight where he's arguably a top 3 guy at featherweight now, if he wanted to be there still. But he's a young guy. He's still growing. I don't see any reason why he can't be a real problem at 130, bro. I don't see a lot of guys that are going to beat him.
Yeah, it's a fight. Here's another one of your guys. We should just call this card the your guy card. The Big Stepa. We love a little Big Stepa. Khalil Ko taking on Manuel Gallegos. Fight that was supposed to happen earlier. Is this the fight where Khalil gets that opportunity where he kind of announces himself as like a Diego Pacheco level prospect? Because Gallegos, it's not rocket science what he's going to do. He's going to come forward. He's going to throw punches, but he's there kind of for Khalil Ko to kind of take advantage of everything that he does. What do you expect?
I mean, it's made for what Khalil does well at the end of the day. You know what I mean? It's a guy who is super aggressive. Khalil's a sharp counterpuncher, super fast hands. I think he has one of the best jabs in boxing, and so does he. He thinks he's got one of the best jabs in boxing, and he uses it. I don't know if this is the fight that will announce him that way, but I think he's kind of already made that announcement, you know, having Eddie Hearn come into the ring with him and say, this is the best American light heavyweight going. You know, I think Khalil's a guy, bro. And this is a good opponent. This is a good, solid opponent. And it's all part of the development, but I think he's basically there, dude.
Okay. Next one. Here's a real fight alert for those. Ernesto Mercado.
That's what you got to do the fucking air horn, bro. You say real fight alert, bing.
Wait. Okay, real fight alert. Real fight alert. Is that better?
Yeah.
Is that better?
I'm just giving you game. You know what I mean?
Okay. So real fight alert. Ernesto Mercado taking on Jesus Sriracho. And Sriracho recently beat Beto Palmetta in like an amazing fight on ProBox TV, which I encourage people to go back and watch it. Ernesto Mercado was basically fighting all these very, very good fighters that prospects and had been fighting, then has been a little inactive this year. This is a real fight, and this is Mercado's first fight with Matchroom.
Unfortunately, I have nothing to add on that one, Bub. You gotta take the wheel on that.
Okay, so that is that. Also, one small thing to note is Zaquan Moses, who's a relative of Shakur Stevenson, will be the first guy, will be on this card. So it's his first pro fight, so he'll be there. So I expect like a Shakur walkout, and I expect a Shakur DAZN state run interview. So if you're into those, you can probably get a Shakur state run interview. Maybe, and then here's another one. The return of Subriel Matisse. He's coming back on a pay-per-view. It's not on DAZN. It's a pay-per-view on payperview.com. And
payperview.com.
View.com. PPV.com. Yeah. No, they exist, you know. If you don't feel comfortable buying a DAZN pay-per-view, they do the conjoint pay-per-views on ppv.com, so you can do that. But he's going to be fighting anything you're looking for with Subriel Matisse.
I mean, I wish I had known that it was happening. I mean, that's very exciting. We're talking about a guy that's top 10 at 140, if not top 5. You know, we're seeing if he can come back and continue just being himself after a close decision loss to a slippery guy.
It's also kind of hard, right? That he lost a competitive fight and then immediately is like off television.
Yeah. A little
Yeah.
harsh too, I would say. I think that he's a talent, you know.
Seems a little strange. Finally, on ProBox TV this Saturday, don't miss it. Nicholas Flaz versus Christian Gomez.
Good fight.
Blast Valsant back, and Joseph Diaz Jr. versus Yordenis Salinas. Really like all these matchups. Dakota, anything about that card that you really, really like?
Really like Nicholas Flaz. He's definitely a main event fighter, so it's good to see him getting that love. You know, the win over Jahi, the win over I'm forgetting his name now, but he got a good win his last fight as well. I think he's tremendous. I'm a little surprised that Jojo Diaz is still getting broadcast slots, to be honest. I mean, I love Jojo Diaz, but he's taken at least 4 or 5 losses in a row now.
That is true. Well, Dakota, that is our show. We went a little over. What do you where will people follow you? What can people expect and all that stuff?
You can always follow me at the Slip and Weave Podcast, YouTube and Instagram, ITR Boxing. You can catch me on the Lukie Boxing Show. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shoe Shine, all the regulars. The
well informed chat today.
And when do we not, bro?
Yeah, every now and then we get kind of like bots jump in and they're just like saying stuff. You know, it gets a little weird when we stop reading the comments. When
we either have the best chat or we have a weird chat. It's one or the other, dude.
The best is when we have the hybrid, where it's the weird chat with the best chat
mixed in, like a little weirdo mixed in. Yeah, those are fun. A little wild card.
Remember when you had to call me? I forget what it was, but there was like one weird text in there, and you had to call me because it was so weird. So.
We put in a lot of hours, bro.
Yeah. So okay. So you can find Dakota. Twitter is really wanting Dakota to get a Twitter account. People on there are wanting Dakota. He won't do it.
Who the fuck wants me to get a Twitter, dude?
There's people that are screen recording your videos from the show and putting it on Twitter and saying Dakota from the Lukie Boxing Podcast. I'm just giving you a development. Is this real? This is really happening. Yeah. So they're not
Send me examples, bro. Send me examples.
I will send you examples, but this is starting to be a thing. And then people are citing you. So they're saying Dakota of the Lukie Boxing Podcast on Twitter. It is happening, bro. But I know you're not going there.
If I'm the most popping thing on Twitter and I don't have one, that's a flex, dude.
That is a flex. Okay. So we will be back next week and probably Sunday. More than likely Sunday. Not sure the time. Me and Dakota will get it figured out later this week. And then the following week, I hate to break it to you, Dakota, we might be working on Friday night. We might be doing the live after Jake Paul, Mike Tyson. We might be trying to grow the channel and doing a quick reaction to that because that's probably going to be a break the internet moment. So I know that's going to hurt your heart, but that probably is happening.
We'll do it for Shadeja Green.
We'll do it for Shadeja Green, who, by the way, we talk about momentum. I want to see Shadeja regain that momentum because her last fight, I wouldn't say it was bad, but it looked a little bit like maybe that momentum has kind of stalled a little bit. And I want to see her get back to kind of going downhill like she was. I guess downhill sounds bad, but I mean like no resistance.
Snowballing.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you say downhill, it means people might go like, what do you want, a career?
You want to watch me fall?
Yeah, it's like I don't want to see your career go down. I want to see you fight as though there's no resistance. It's just going.
Yeah.
So I think, but anyways, that's what you got coming up. We appreciate each and every one of you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up, go to the Slip and Weave podcast, all that stuff. And we will be back next week.